This is the edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions. This one will be looking world exclusively, at turned, how I turned the alignment of a road that was almost given the final kind of approval by the government of the day, the government of East Pakistan or Pakistan in 1970. That alignment was said to be finally given to the area going from Dahadokin towards Asirganj Bazaar and further to the southeast, and then to Biani Bazaar, by reversing the line that had been in the main demand for the community based in Chandorpur, to the east of the river Kuyara. How did I do that? I was not in post in January 1970 as the commissioner or the governor of East Pakistan or the commissioner of Chittagong division. But the man who had signed or had completely finalized the program and decided to take away the line from Chandorpur to Asirganj, going from Dahadokin through the village of Nagaur, was the divisional commissioner in the Chittagong division in East Pakistan in January 1970. And there was no way that any civilian could even begin to challenge what he was doing, or he would do, or he had done. I still don't know how the people of Chandrapur knew where to find me in Dhaka, because I had not communicated to them my location during the night, what is called the night shift. The newspaper offices, the daily newspaper offices, ran, the main operations were run during the night, during the evening. And the newspaper where I was the chief political correspondent, remember, this is one of the posts that I held without seeking any money, any remuneration whatsoever, nor being offered any, nor being tempted to receive any money. Remember what I said about my unique role, which is that I do the things I do morally. And the force of morality is unique to my tactics, ethics, morality, and evidence. Now, I don't know how the people of Samdarpur, my village, to the east of the river Kushiara, found out where to find me. But these people, kind of like a divine kind of communication or revelation, had discovered exactly where to find me. So they sent their ambassador or the envoy, a man called Ziauddin Chaudhry. Now, Ziauddin Chaudhry traveled from Sandarpur to Dahadokin to Silot, from Silot to Dhaka, and arrived exactly where to find me. I was in the office of the daily newspaper, where I was the chief political correspondent. And somebody came into the newsroom to tell me that someone was waiting for me at the entrance or at the outside reception or something. And I went outside and I was absolutely gobsmacked because I had not done any communication with Ziauddin Chaudhry nor anybody else in the village. So, how did he find me? I have no idea now as to the details of what he said they found me through, how they found me. Anyway, Ziauddin Chaudhry came loaded with files of newspaper, documents, A4 documents, folders. How many folders I can't remember now, but heavy, hefty kind of number of documents. And he was almost in tears as he related to me the total horror of knowing or finding out that Moinuddin Khan, who was the divisional commissioner of Chittagong, had robbed Chandrapur and the area of years and years and years of battle and had taken away the alignment, that is the route from Chandrapur to Asirganj Bazar. And the people of Chandrapur were hoping that I would be able to do something about it. And so they sent Ziauddin Chaudhry to me. Now, Ziauddin Chaudhry, who knew him, was a man who used to enjoy his gua, shufari. Absolutely shufari addicted man. Can't remember what he was doing in that evening in Dhaka, 200 or 230 miles from home. And I could not offer him any shufari. I did offer him, I think, tea, cups of tea, because we heard in the newsroom the service of a boy who would serve cups of tea, plenty, throughout the night. And this boy gave him the tea, I think, and some biscuits or whatever. So after getting the brief from him, essentially that Moinuddin Khan had abused his power as the commissioner, Chittagong divisional commissioner, to rob the people of Chandrapur of this alignment and this route. I told Ziauddin Chaudhry either to return home to Silot by the return train or whatever, the earliest train, or stay in a hotel or whatever the arrangement was. And I got to writing the piece. My piece appeared as a banner headline across 8 columns. And that just shows my influence, the influence I exerted at the newspaper. And the news editor was Mir Nurul Islam. Mir Nurul Islam died in a traffic accident, I think, after Bangladesh came into existence. So I never met Mir Nurul Islam after the events of December 1971, when a turmoil was happening, etc., etc. And so Mir Nurul Islam was a totally professional journalist. And he was very, very kind of supportive of me, and he gave me the necessary space for the quality that I brought to the journalism of the paper. And every single piece I wrote, significant piece I wrote, had a telling impact in favor of the newspaper. So I wrote the piece. I can't remember the exact heading because I haven't seen the paper for 52 years. And apparently, a man from Chandrapur visiting Silot on the day that the newspaper hit the streets picked up the particular newspaper, and for some reason, probably he was expecting the piece in the paper because he must have been aware of the mission they had sent Ziauddin Chaudhry to me to accomplish. And apparently, the man was so excited at seeing the 8-column banner headed item condemning Moinuddin Khan that apparently he needed help, otherwise, he would have collapsed on the street and would have had a fatal accident or something. Apparently, the man needed restraining and calming down before he could travel back to the village, Chandrapur, which was quite a task, traveling by bus up to Dhaka and from there on foot from Dhaka to Chandrapur. And he only knew how fast he traveled to Chandrapur with this newspaper. Because the people of Chandrapur, the whole area, were absolutely devastated at the loss of the route. And they had no hope, there would be no court case that could be launched to stop Moinuddin Khan. Because he was the head of the division in Chittagong, which included Silot. And it would be ages before any verdict could be reached. But by then, the route would have been completely done away from Chandrapur. So when he arrived back at Chandrapur with the newspaper, there was indescribable mirth and merriment and joy in the whole village. It was like a war had been won. Now, on the same day, as I was sitting, the following day, on the same day that the paper appeared, and in the evening, as usual, I was sitting in the newsroom, and I received a telephone call from Chittagong. And the telephone call was not from a man, it was from a woman. It was the wife of the Divisional Commissioner Moinuddin Khan. And the woman plaintively said to me, "So, you are going to sink your uncle? You are going to sink your uncle and destroy his career? Why are you going to do that?" Now, this was the wife of the Moinuddin Khan, who happened to be related as an uncle mine, because he was the elder brother of the wife of my youngest uncle, who was himself a top civil servant, but had nothing to do with this particular event or had nothing to do with me doing anything that I did. So I gave her consolation answers, but I gave her the facts. I said that the demand for the route going from Dhaka to Bianibazar through Chandrapur had been active demand for a very long time. So how did he, Moinuddin Khan, think that he could do that? He could just take away that demand from these people because he got the power as the Divisional Commissioner of Chittagong. The rest, as they say, is history, because the alignment was restored to when the plan was actually approved by the government. Whenever it did become approved, it was restored to the line that included Chandrapur, from Dhaka to Chandrapur to Bianibazar. Now the story is that the bridge over the river Kushiara, the transport bridge that has been built, it is not anything like the fit and proper and beautiful and strong and solid bridge that should have been built. I am outraged at the stupidity and the corruption that went into making this miserable bridge. Now, to all the morons in the village, some of the morons are in the UK. Let me say this. Did any of your ancestors, or did your ancestors combined, do anything like the thing that I did by stopping Moinuddin Khan's deeds? The answer is no. So I said to these morons, do not speak ill of me. Only because তোমরা জিদে মরি যাইতে কি মাখালোর হল আমি তোমরা কোনো কোনটা নিছিনি তোমরা হকলটির সম্পত্তি এখানে করিয়াও তো মহিউদ্দিন খানরে তোমরা বদলাইতে পারলাই না মন করতে পারলাই না ইট টুক মি মাখালোর ফুয়াইন just like it took me to stop the UK government to stop the Crossrail hole aimed at destroying Brick Lane. মাখালোর ফুয়াইন তোমরা কোনো আইডিয়া আসেনি কিলা ক্রসরেলের গাত্রে বন করছি We're talking about big projects like the HS2, which I oppose. There is no way that you can be a careerist, opportunist, and be also effective opponent of government career decisions. HS2 is like Crossrail an immorality. The only way to stop the HS2 is by exposing its morality. Now, what politician in the House of Commons in the UK, what member of parliament exists that speaks morality? Is there anyone in all of the United Kingdom, in all the parties, all the front benches, back benches, whatever? There is none. Quasi-quatrang, the abnormality, the obscenity of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has now lifted the ban on the banker's bonus. And Liz Truss is now going to do the cut or cuts to the Texas bill owed by the rich and the powerful. And in neither of these two issues is there any sound being heard from the politically murdered Labour Party, fronted by the political murderer Keir Starmer. I say that the only way to stop HS2, only way to stop the corruption of the City of London is by exposing the crooks and instituting real audit and accountability. Has Keir Starmer heard of any of this? Real accountability. The answer is no. HS2 is grotesque. £200 billion plus. For what? £200 billion is by far the biggest kind of expenditure for a project that will not produce any benefit. And there is no demand. there is no demand among the traveling public for an HS2. There is a demand for refurbishing, repairing the majority of the railway lines across England that have not been touched for decades. Now, if those networks were repaired, refurbished, then savings worth 500 billion pounds or more would happen. Why is it impossible for Keir Starmer to say what I've just said? None of the career members of parliament representing or misrepresenting the constituencies along the route of the HS2 has challenged the immorality of the HS2. And by only challenging the immorality of HS2 and the dishonesty of the HS2, can HS2 be stopped? But the Labour Party is dead. The Liberals are in the outer space, disappearing fast. And the Greens are painting their fantasies in multiple colors. And the Scots Nats in the House of Commons are obsessed with the navels. They have no UK-wide framework politically, nor has any other party. So all of these should be put together collectively and exposed. And the moral pressure created with such force of evidence that the morons have no way but to scrap the HS2. We shall come back to HS2 and we shall come back to the Dhaka-Dakkin Biyanibazar route that I made possible. I alone made that possible. Let nobody forget that. I put Moinuddin Khan in the spot. And he had no way of escape but to surrender and withdraw his grotesque abuse of office. Incidentally, Moinuddin Khan was the holder of the highest government position from the village of Chandrapur. Next to him was my uncle, who was persuaded to marry Moinuddin Khan's sister, Toizun. Now, the way that marriage was made possible is something I witnessed. And I shall be discussing the way that Khurshid Ali Morir made daily trips to our village home and literally begged my grandmother, Muhammad Tayyibun Nasa Khatun, every day to agree to her son, Musaddar Ali, marrying Toizun, whose name officially was given as Mumtaz Begum. And I shall tell the story of dozens of telegrams that my uncle, although he held high office, lacked decency and gratitude in the family. He sent dozens of telegrams when my father was at home and asked my father to travel from destination A to destination B across the whole of the East Pakistan province, taking Toizun from one town to another to meet Musaddar Ali. That was grotesquely uncivil and stupid. And it fell on me. I was not supposed to, I had not been trained formally by anyone to read telegrams and interpret the telegrams. And yet I had the task of doing this, and I correctly did interpret every single telegram. Fetch! One telegram would say, fetch Mumtaz from Maiman Singh. How dare Musaddar send such telegrams to his otherwise respected elder brother, namely my father? Fetch! Ungrateful Musaddar remained ungrateful to the end of his days. My father gave him the money to go to college and do the whatever. My father didn't do that for me. I read mainly, contrary to people's mythology, I mainly went to university. The expenses were borne by scholarship money and money that my mother, from her own sources, gave me. But Musaddar was hugely provided for by my father. My father made lots and lots of money as a very skilled engineer and architect, whatever. But he was not shown the respect by Musaddar that Musaddar owed. Now, this is the story of Sandarpur. Sandarpur, I am putting it on the map, on the historic and evidential map. It's not on the Wikipedia, but I am making sure that it will be on the Wikipedia. And it will be known for producing some of the most successful, accomplished people in a wide, very long, wide area. Almost all the people in the immediate area are related to me. Of course, quite apart from the Bed Shah, there was another eminent scholar and learned man called Anda Hafiz. Now, the story of Anda Hafiz is based on real fact, which is that Anda Hafiz went to Makkah for pilgrimage. Now, in those days, the transport was very different and arduous, and it took very long time to travel to Saudi Arabia, what became Saudi Arabia. There, Anda Hafiz, who was not Anda at that time, met a very beautiful Saudi girl. And he fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. And they planned to return to his place. Now, this girl's father said to him, I don't want to lose my daughter. I want you to come back with my daughter from time to time so that I can see her. Do you promise to do that? He said, yes. By the time he came back to Silot and Chandrapur, for whatever reason, he never returned to Saudi Arabia with his wife. So what happened? He lost his eyes. He lost the sight, the power of the eyes. How did that happen? Because when his Saudi father-in-law made him make the promise, he also said that what do you offer as your punishment if you don't keep your word? And Andafiz, who was not under at that time, that is, who was not blind at the time, he said, if I don't keep my promise, I'll lose my eyes. And when he didn't keep his promise, he lost his eyes. So Andafiz is probably my, well, the other side of my blood, that is. Bedshah is one side and Andafiz is the other. And I have to check the actual genealogy and the histories to see whether I come from that woman or I am descended from another woman, another wife, whether Andafiz had another wife, or I am from the Saudi wife that he married. But Andafiz had children that became Hafiz as well, and his children were, with one exception, I think, all his daughters were very good looking. Whether that is to do with the fact that they had their mother, I mean, was this woman is not established because I haven't got access to the full records, if there was records. All the sources of all these accounts actually come back to my grandmother, who might be one of the daughters of this woman, if that is the case, or descendants of this woman. The, the generational divisions and lineages need to be clearly established. But that is essentially what happened with Andafiz. So he's one of the people in Chandrapur that had a kind of multifarious kind of lines of activities and achievements. But he was Hafiz of the Quran as well, of course. And it is widely known that he was highly regarded, despite the fact that he couldn't return to Saudi Arabia with his wife. He was highly regarded and he was treated as a holy man, holy person. So, him, Amdafiz, and the Bed Shah, were they of the same generation? They could be. They could have been. Is something that needs investigating. So that is Chandrapur, and there are other people, other branches of the family, of course, included Ziauddin Chowdhury and his father's brother, who was Arman Ali Chowdhury, who was the head of languages at the Sylhet Government School during the British time. Now, Arman Ali Chowdhury was not a Chowdhury, but this is all happening during the British time still. But Chowdhury was a valid title at the time. And Arman Ali Chowdhury was either a student at Badeshwar High School or a teacher. The details have to be again verified. And he was staying in a house in Khanishail or Khaniail. This house belonged to a Well, Khani Isle is full of Chaudhurys at that time, anyway. So, this house that he was staying in belonged to the Chaudhurys, and the Arman Ali Chaudhry and these people had a argument about something. And at one point of the row, these people, or one of the people who was arguing with him, challenged Arman Ali Chaudhry, Arman Ali, who was not a Chaudhry at that time, and he was from Chandrapur, and said, this man was a Chaudhry in Khani Isle, said, I'm a Chaudhry and you are a Talukdar. So Arman Ali Chaudhry, who was not a Chaudhry yet, said, okay, I'll sort it out. So the following day, he went to Shillong. Remember, Sylhet was very much in the neighborhood of Shillong rather than in Dhaka. Sylhet was part of Assam, so Shillong was the main city or town in Assam that had all the activities going on. And Arman Ali was a dedicated fighter for freedom, independence from the British. And he was very close to Zakir Hussain, Dr. Zakir Hussain, who became a central government minister in post August 47 India. So Zakir Hussain was one of his closest colleagues. So Arman Ali Chaudhry went to Shillong and got the government, whatever department he went to include a declaration in the government circular of the day or of the week, announcing that Arman Ali was a Chaudhry. It was the Assam Gazette. And Arman Ali Chaudhry returned to Badeshwar, Khani Isle, and told these morons that he was a Chaudhry. Then they should shut up. This kind of thing cannot be done by bureaucracy and by dependence. These sorts of things can be done only by the likes of Arman Ali, who was an uncle of my mother's, and was a cousin of my grandmother's. It's a relationship extends both ways. Both my grandmothers were cousins, sisters themselves. So Arman Ali Chaudhry was a cousin to both of them. And Arman Ali Chaudhry was an uncle to both my parents. So Ziauddin Chaudhry was a cousin to both my parents. And Ziauddin Chaudhry to me was an uncle. So when he went to Sylhet, when he went to Dhaka to see me with those files about the route from Dhaka Dukkin to Bianezar, he went there with the confidence that he would be able to influence me, but he need not have bothered. I would have been most ready and willing to do the necessary to stop Moinuddin Khan from taking away the route from Sondarpur to anywhere else, which I did. And I said yesterday, it was this Arman Ali Chaudhry, who was a teacher of the well-known poet of Sylhet, Dilwar. And when during a meeting, chance meeting in Brick Lane, during one of his trips before he died, Dilwar was made aware of who I was. That is, I was related to Arman Ali Chaudhry. I was a grandson of Arman Ali Chaudhry. He stood up in excitement and he grabbed hold of me and he would not let go. So that's the kind of type of people that come from Chandrapur. Unlike the people who refuse to recognize Chandrapur, these are the facts and these are the personalities that come from Chandrapur. By Chandrapur, I mean Greater Chandrapur, of course, because it's a bigger village than the name may suggest. And the post office in Chandrapur was the post office for a whole big area. To the upstream to the Delgam of Banigam, I think. It covered Banigam up the river and it went similar length down the river. So it was miles and miles and miles of territory that were covered by the post office service. Based in Chandrapur Bazaar. One of the later postmasters in that post and post office, not the last one, but one of the later ones, was a man called Abdur Rauf Khan. Now, Abdur Rauf Khan was actually a cousin of Moinuddin Khan, but a cousin removed from one stage, I think. I think his mother was Moinuddin Khan's hufu or aunt. Anyway, Abdur Rauf Khan became a postmaster in Chandrapur's post office. So what he would do, he would write his name, A.R. Khan, BPM and AT. The A.R. Khan, of course, by relation, a bit removed, but relation was an uncle to me. But this is a humorous kind of story about Abdur Rauf Khan. He would write A.R. Khan, BPM, and AT. Now, BPM is branch postmaster, and AT, assistant teacher. Now, these are not grand posts, but to Abdur Rauf Khan, these were grand. And he took particular pride in showing his BPM and AT nomenclature, if you like, wherever he went. Of course, after 1971, when administrative changes took place, I think Abdur Rauf Khan lost some of the connections. And I heard that he took to becoming a kind of sort of morir, village morir, and a kind of negotiator in disputes between people. But going back to the BPM and AT, during one visit to Dahadukin from Sundarpur, we had several community-based events taking place, negotiations and so on. So whenever I was visiting the village, I took part in whatever was going on. And on one occasion, it fell on me to go to Dahadukin with A.R. Khan and some other people. So A.R. Khan was sitting in a tea shop. Tea shop is a feature in the village. It's a very prominent feature in the village social life. So we were talking in the tea shop, and Abdurrahman Khan displayed his name in such a way that one of the other parties noticed it and he wanted to know what this BPM and AT meant. Now, the solemnity and the gravity and the pride with which Abdurrahman Khan delivered the answer was something to behold, to believe. I cannot describe it possibly. Such was the vanity of this man, such was the artificiality of this man, that he thought being a branch postmaster and assistant teacher constituted one of the country's highest offices. Of course, being a postmaster was a responsible job, but it was not to be elevated beyond its actual state. Now, when he was acting as AT, assistant teacher, Abdurrahman Khan, who was not very articulate, wanted the glory. So there was a minister, an East Pakistan government minister, about to visit Sundarpur Bazaar as part of the tour. And this minister was about to come by motor launch from Fenchugonj upstream to Sundarpur via other places, other stops. So that was known about 2 days or so before the actual event. So Abdurrahman Khan decided to assign me to write, to prepare and get printed a welcome for the minister. I'll come to the hilarious things that happened on that. By the time I arrived with the memorandum and the reception welcoming paper, Abdurrahman Khan took it from me and read it as if he had written it. That was the stupidity, ignorance, and ingratitude on the part of Abdurrahman Khan. Now, I had written that in impossible, physically impossible, world class impossibility, because overnight at the printers in Sylhet town, remember that was the early 1960s, I dictated the whole script. And it was not a computerized composition. It was a manual composition in Bengali. And I dictated the whole thing of my mind. It wasn't anything written in my mind. The welcome. And this compositor absolutely brilliantly composed the whole thing based on my verbal dictation. Think about that. It was an impossible task that was made possible by me and that compositor. So when the following day, because we worked overnight, when the following day I arrived with the memorandum of welcome for the minister, this complete criminal, A.R. Khan, stole the thing from me and read the thing before the minister, pretending all the way that he had written it. I don't know whether Abdurrahman Khan is alive or dead, but that act was an evil act on his part. But I said to the other morons that this is the kind of thing that I do. I created that absolutely world class event for the whole of the Chandrapur area and the whole of the community, the whole of the region. And that welcome must be available somewhere in the archives, in the government departments and the libraries. I wrote that, and I wrote that without any script. I created the script. Verbally, I dictated that. When was that? It was in the early 1960s. That's all I can remember. But I later heard, of course, when I was outside of the country, away from the country, that Abdurrahman Khan became one of the two crooks that were kind of doing business by operating as arbitrators between people involved in disputes, but actually stealing money from both parties. One was Abdurrahman Khan and the other was Shafoi. Shafoi was a younger brother to Moinuddin Khan, was not the son of the same mother. He was a step brother. So these two crooks cheated a lot of people in Sondarpur. So if the criminals think that I did not notice what they were doing, well, I did notice. I was hearing things and I was believing every single word of it. Shafoi was a depraved criminal congenital liar, as was Abdurrahman Khan, BPM and AT. These two crooks stole a lot of people's money and cheated a lot of people and caused a lot of misery to people that came to them for alleged help. Abdurrahman Khan was evil and Shafoi was even more evil. Shafoi's father, Moinuddin Khan's father as well, Khurshid Ali Morir. Khurshid Ali Morir physically was a very tall and significant, remarkable looking image. And his profession was as a Morir, as a writer in the vicinity of the courts. That was his calling. That is what he did for a living. But in the kind of intervals between the various tasks, he did what Shafoi and Abdurrahman Khan turned out to be doing. He did some kind of dispute arbitration man for people who came to Silot town from the village, Sondarpur, and knew his whereabouts and approached him for his services. About 80% of Khurshid Ali Morir's income was illicit because he cheated people and he overcharged them and so on. He did that, but also he did some opposite things. He helped people in some remarkable ways when people were in difficulties. But his stature, his rank among those people who sought his help was much higher than people might imagine. So for him to make a daily visit to my house and bow to my grandmother, Musammat Tayyibun-Nasa Khatun, begging her to allow her son Musaddar to marry Khurshid Ali's daughter, Toizun, was something to behold. This happened for months, 6, 7 months. Moinuddin Khan, too, made many visits to our house, doing the same mission, begging our family to allow Musaddar to marry Toizun. That shows, on the evidence, that shows the actual height of our family as compared to them, based on morality, based on ethics, and based on the spirituality and the legacy of the Bed Shah. Nobody existed and has existed and will exist as compared to the Bed Shah. And I owe it to the Bed Shah to tell the truth about his legacy and how they benefited humanity in the area and beyond. In Brick Lane, as I talked about the deportation that I averted. I stopped the deportation of Abdul Salik. Now, Abdul Salik would never last for as long as he did last had he been actually been deported and had it been made legal for him to be barred from returning to the UK. Because he had come to the UK in 1970 by forgery, by using a forged passport with somebody else's name. Although Abdul Salik has left a lot of lying entries in the Facebook accounts, which he got stuffed by getting them written by somebody, more than one individual he paid to replenish and make up tales about him, which is completely pointless tales. Abdul Salik and his immediate family were financially very ill off. Unlike the story that Abbasuddin alias Halal tells. If what Abbasuddin alias Halal says about Abdul Salik being well off from the beginning is true, then Abdul Salik would never have to come to the UK by using somebody else's forged passport in 1970. Simple as that. So to save Abdul Salik from certain destruction, it took me. None of his so-called friends, later friends or acquaintances. Abdul Salik became notorious for calling people like the sellers of the Shinni at the entrance to their Shahjalal shrine in Silot. When he set up shop at 108 Brick Lane, that address belonged to the properties owned by the late Musa. When Abdul Salik got that sweet shop, so-called, going, he would tout from the back of his restaurant or sweet shop. He would shout at people passing through the street and plead with them to go and join him in the cafe or whatever sweet shop that he had set up. This was a con. Of the hundreds of such pleas that he made to people, hundreds of people, over quite a number of years. Abdul Salik never told the truth because what he did that for was to use people's generosity and kindness to extract information that had nothing to do with any of them getting any benefit, but information that Abdul Salik needed for his own grotesque selfishness. And every time somebody of some note would have left his shop, before they would even leave the premises, he would tell the remaining people in the shop how bad that individual was that had just left. Now, had Abdul Salik said these things to the people, to their faces, then Abdul Salik would have been murdered 100 times over. Because everything he said against people was a lie. And every time he said that, he did that with casualness of such stupidity and insensitivity that anyone with self respect would feel justified and would be justified in taking action against him, including violence. The ingratitude of Abdul Salik was notorious. Before he got hold of the 108 Brick Lane, Abdul Salik got the so-called Salik's restaurant set up in Hanbury Street. That was done by fraud. Abdul Salik had no money to set up a restaurant, buy the building. So he conned one of the people from Balagonj to allow him to become a tenant and start a business. The long story cut short is this, that Abdul Salik never paid any rent to the man for 16, 17, 18, 19, or whatever number of years. And that man or his relations were forced to take the matter to court. Eventually, there was an order made in a central London county court against Abdul Salik, ordering him to pay the man more than £100,000 in arrears, rent arrears alone, not to speak of other costs, which would have come to several hundred other pounds. This is the story of the Khoodeelaar campaign defending the community. How dare Abdul Salik telephone Shoaib Chowdhury and say that the Brick Lane defense was done by অশিক্ষিত মানুষ? কত বড় অকৃতজ্ঞ বেঈমান! When the late Abdus Sabur, who was a member of the East Pakistan National Awami Party, led by Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani, when Abdul Sabur was approached by Abdul Salik, because Abdul Sabur had been resident in the UK since the 1960s, and Abdul Salik had just arrived as an illegal immigrant using somebody else's passport. When Abdul Salik approached Abdul Sabur, he did that with complete series of pretend humility and kind of humbleness. And Abdul Sabur became kind of influenced by that, and he agreed to help him. By the time Abdul Sabur's help had established Abdul Salik to an extent that he hadn't been established until Abdul Sabir helped him, Abdul Salik began lying. So Abdul Sabur started telling people that this is a liar. The lies, the limits, the extent of Abdul Salik's lies and lying is unique in the history of the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets. He was a habitual liar that would make it a task to keep track of his lying and his acts of ingratitude. And never, never in his entire life, well, life meaning the time that he had been in the UK before he became the subject of a deportation order, as I discussed earlier, not in this edition but before. Abdul Salik never went to any community defense activity. He was nowhere seen or visible in defending the community against racists. He only did that when a racist like Dan Jones, whom he called Dan Jones, or a racist like Phil Maxwell, whom he called Phil Maxwell, not Phil Maxwell. When any of these racists was about, Abdul Salik pretended to be active as well for a few minutes for the photographs, holding the placard or whatever. So we go on to Monica Ali and the protest against Monica Ali's book. Abdul Salik lied and pretended that something I had written against Monica Ali was his work. Because he had requested me to go to his 108 Brick Lane, where he said that he needed me to lead the campaign against Monica Ali. Well, I didn't need him to tell me that I was needed. I had already been contextually already doing the necessary. So I said, I wrote a statement which said, included words to the effect that our community did not need additionally being insulted by anyone. But Abdul Salik, in his stupidity, said to a white reporter who came to Brick Lane in response to the false call that Abdul Salik made by using the script that I had written against the Monica Ali book. He, Abdul Salik, said that he would burn a copy of Monica Ali's book. Why would he say that? Because none of the conversations that we had against Monica Ali had remotely anything to do with burning her book. So it later transpired that Abdul Salik only said he would burn the book because he considered that saying that would get him in the news. Think about that. How stupid. So we shall be talking about all of these more in the next editions. This has been 1 hour and I think 11 minutes, this edition. And the time is, what time is it now? In terms of the clock, what time is it? It's 22:47 hours GMT. So we are calling an end to this one at 22:47 GMT on Thursday, the 22nd of September 2022.